Tim, it's really cool seeing that Union Jack go outside. This has explored all over the world. Now it's explored space.
It's great to be wearing it.
Today we're at the Science Museum for this wonderful event. It's a one-day conference, the wonders and challenges of human spaceflight.
So he just keeps going.
Many of us will think that being in space is a bit like floating. It's just a lovely experience of being weightless, but we know that that's not quite true. The effects on our bodies in terms of muscle wastage, in terms of disintegrating joints if we're there too long, making our eyeballs feel as though they're popping out of our heads, and that might make our vision distorted. All of these effects show us that space is an extremely hostile environment for the human being. So we want to explore exactly what it feels like to be under those conditions. What's the effect on us cognitively, physiologically, emotionally? So we've assembled a group of people to talk about that, philosophers, medics, sensory scientists, to understand the real effect on humanity and on the human, about how we're changed physiologically and psychologically by these experiences.
When we go into space, we decondition as well. We decondition faster than here on Earth, much faster. We see muscles in their size and their force output reducing. And indeed, we can expect this sort of atrophy to be significantly greater the longer we are in space if our countermeasures are insufficient.
One of the more surprising things we've discovered about space recently is that it can affect the intracranial pressure. And we found in recent years that some astronauts have come back from space and their eyesight has been seriously affected, and in some cases permanently. Again, we think it's something to do with the fluid shifts, and we think that if the pressure builds up in the brain, that's going to change the shape of the eyeball. And so we're really now developing some experiments to look at what happens to the eyesight, what happens to intracranial pressure, to understand what's going on there. Space is an amazing subject that touches every aspect and angle of life here on Earth. And therefore it makes complete sense that the UK Space Agency teams up with the AHRC to look at how some aspects of space link to arts and humanities. We need to pass these over to researchers to make sure that really every aspect and angle of the experience of going into space is studied by experts who know what they're looking at.
Numerous images from the past show people keenly observing the sky. In 15th century art, we don't find any kind of representation of the Milky Way. We find the stars are evenly spaced across the sky. Also in the 1950s, early television series portrayed space travel. There was a program called Captain Video and the Video Rangers.
Should we encourage a one-way mission to Mars, or should we worry about it ethically?
It sounds glib, but we are all going to die, right? What are we in denial of here? I think a lot of us would think, God, what a remarkable thing to do. And aren't I perhaps a little bit sad because I'd rather stay closer to my local Waitrose? Particularly sort of in the modern world, the idea of the huge risks that are involved in space travel for humans, and given that we could do so much now with machines, it seems almost bizarre. But throughout human history, of course, people have always been willing to put their own lives at risk in order to push the boundaries of knowledge and also to reach the highest experiences.
The crew would settle down to a weightless life in a spacecraft with 4 times more room than Gemini. And they discovered on occasion that water particles which had been dumped overboard could be confused with stars. Care will have to be taken to avoid this confusion on future flights.
Yeah, you're just showing off now.
What is it like to be in space with no sense of which way is up? Can we actually have a sense of being upright?
This is a centrifuge that's available from the ESA running in Cologne. And it tells us that the threshold, the amount of gravity that you need in order to ensure your perceptual stability, your perceptual upright, is about the level that you get on Mars, about 40% of the Earth's value.
We'll hear from Ophelia Darrois, who will talk about how our senses, usually integrating with one another, talking to one another, are dominated by the fact we're in an environment with gravity, and when that environment is suspended, maybe our senses will work differently on one another.
Changes in how fluids circulate in your body will mean that the very basic access that you have to your to the state of your viscera will change. And that's something which, just the phenomenology, I think, of being sick in space and seasick, whether they are the same or different, is actually a very interesting thing to investigate.
Please welcome Heston Blumenthal and Daniel Pritchard. At the end of the day, we'll be hearing from 3 Michelin star chef Heston Blumenthal and the project that he and his team from the experimental kitchen at the Fat Duck restaurant had, working with the UK Space Agency, working with the European Space Agency to prepare food under extremely tight constraints to give Tim Peake memorable experiences of eating in space.
These astronauts, they're human beings, they're not computers. There's a reason why there's 6 human beings on the space station. It's because computers can't do what they do. With Tim, what we wanted to do was we did sort of 2 processes with him. One was talking to his family and then talking to him about the food that triggered his memories, positive memories. And we were in the factory thinking, God, after 6 months or 4 months, what's the kind of stuff you'd miss? And it would be, something like a sandwich.
Like a sandwich, yeah. We often put people into space. Speeches are made about the significance for humankind of this endeavour, but people often don't tell us what that significance is. Here today with humanities researchers and scientists working together, we're going to try and find out how to unpack that, the wonders and challenges of human spaceflight.